Remember those study sessions you had with friends before an important test? That's this video. I'm your study buddy. I'll be firing off some questions to get you ready for your written test. And this also will serve as a good review for your oral exam on the check ride. For time's sake, there will only be a short pause between questions, so make sure you pause and answer each question. Just like on the oral, there won't be any references or any answer choices. And I know, as cruel as that is, you will have better recall once you've had to look something up. And hopefully that makes you correlate different topics and not just regurgitate the things you've memorized. A lot of the questions are very broad and specifically designed to make you think. Good luck, and I wish you the best on all your exams. What are the eligibility requirements to become a private pilot? Your friend shows up in a single-engine airplane that you don't fly. Can you take it for a spin? What is a high-performance airplane? What must you do to act as PIC in such an airplane? What flights are you required to log in your logbook? What information is needed for each of the entries? How do you stay current as a private pilot? What recent experience do you need to carry passengers? If you move, how soon does the FAA need to know? What privileges and limitations apply to private pilots? If you and your friends go on a sightseeing trip, can they pay for the flight? What medical certificate are you required to have in order to exercise private pilot privileges? What are the classes and durations of medical certificates? What documents do you need to have in your possession or readily accessible in the aircraft while acting as PIC? Do you need to carry your pilot logbook with you when you fly? What are the requirements to operate under Basic Med? What documents are required to be in the aircraft? Who is responsible for determining if an aircraft is in an airworthy condition? Who is responsible for ensuring that the aircraft is maintained in an airworthy condition? What airplane inspections are required? Can you overfly the 100-hour inspection? What about the annual? What are airworthiness directives? When are they due? Can you fly an unairworthy airplane? If you can, how can you obtain permission? What is preventive maintenance? What equipment is required for day and night VFR? What do you do if you arrive at the airplane and a piece of equipment is inoperative? For example, the landing or the strobe lights. What is a minimum equipment list? How and where can you get weather for planning a cross-country flight? What are some weather products available for pilots? If you look at this winds aloft forecast, would you say the air is stable at this reporting station? If the crosswind limitation is 20 knots for your airplane, will departing runway 24 with a wind of 300 degrees at 25 knots exceed this limitation? What type of weather is associated with a warm front? How about a cold front? If the field elevation is 4,000 feet and the temperature is 12 degrees Celsius, at what altitude should you expect the freezing level to be? If you have a small temperature dew point spread, what does that tell you? What conditions are necessary for structural icing to occur? Why is frost considered hazardous to flight? What types of weather briefings can you get? What are METARs and TAFs? What are airmets? Who do they apply to? What's the difference between a sigmet and a convective sigmet? Which stage of a thunderstorm has both updrafts and downdrafts? Read the following METARs. Which airports have basic VFR or better? Define the following in terms of ceiling and visibility: IFR, MVFR, and VFR. What is an ATIS? What do these PIREPs say? What minimum information do you need to become familiar with before beginning a flight outside of the traffic pattern? If you're planning a flight from here to here, what altitude choices do you have for a VFR flight? At what altitude do VFR cruising altitudes apply? You're flying at night in great weather with plenty of fuel and realize you've wandered from your calculated heading and you have lost your position. How do you continue? How do you continue in a non-GPS equipped airplane or in a low fuel situation? Would 5,500 be a good cruising altitude for this flight? Would this route and altitude be acceptable at night? What is pilotage and dead reckoning? How long will it take you to go from here to here with a ground speed of 102 knots? Based on this chart, how long will it take you to climb from your airport with a field elevation of 1253 to your cruise altitude of 4,500 feet? You're cruising at 6,500 feet MSL and your route is over this airport and this airport. The cruise power setting is 2300 RPM. Your true course is 274. The wind is 290 at 26 with a temperature of 22 Celsius. And the distance between the airports is 95 nautical miles. Find your magnetic heading, your ground speed, time, and fuel required for the flight between the two airports. If you take off at 13:25 local time, fly for 3 hours 35 minutes, what time will you arrive at this destination? How much fuel do you need for a day VFR flight versus a night flight? How do you activate and close your flight plan? How long do you have to close it before search and rescue begins looking for you? And do you have to close it if you're landing at a towered airport? For each marker, identify airspace from the surface all the way up to Class A, including entry and communication requirements, and basic VFR cloud clearances and visibilities. Your friend just bought an airplane with a maximum ceiling of 25,000 feet. She doesn't have her medical yet and wants you to take her up to see how the airplane handles at flight level 200. What do you say? What is special VFR? Who can use it? What happens to this airspace if the tower closes? What are the minimum altitudes you can fly? In what airspace are Victor Airways, and at what altitude do they begin? You are here. You talk to approach and they say November 12345, radar contact, altimeter 2997. Can you proceed into Class Bravo airspace once you've made radio contact? What's the difference between these airports? Are there any you can't use? What are each of these? What is the height of this obstacle in MSL? What are each of these airspaces? Can you fly through them? And what are the procedures for entering? How do you find TFRs? Can you fly through a TFR? What is density altitude and how does it affect an airplane's performance? How do you get density altitude at your location? Based on these charts and the weather report, what is the required takeoff and landing distance? The runway in use is 30. What is the difference between a normal and a utility category airplane? Calculate the weight and balance. If outside the limits, how can you correct it? What are the primary flight controls? What about secondary flight controls? Why are there 2 magnetos and 2 spark plugs per cylinder? How do you operate a constant speed propeller? How is that different from a fixed pitch propeller? And what are the indications for each? How does the brake system work on the airplane? What's the difference between a fuel-injected and a carbureted system? Why do we need carb heat, and why do the RPMs drop when we use it? Why do we lean the mixture as the airplane climbs? What color is 100 low lead? You're flying and you notice your oil pressure is decreasing and the oil temperature is increasing. What is happening and what do you do? You go out to pre-flight and see red fluid under the airplane. What could that be? Why is the alternator voltage higher than the battery voltage? If you lose your alternator in flight, what will be affected? Which instruments operate off the pitot-static system? Define each of these airspeeds. Which ones are not marked on the airspeed indicator? What is the significance of maneuvering airspeed? Who needs oxygen and at what altitudes? What indications would you observe with a blocked pitot tube? What about a static port? What is hypoxia? What are the symptoms? How do you get it? And how do you fix it? What is hyperventilation? What are the symptoms? How do you get it? And how do you fix it? What are some things that can happen if you fly sick? How do you minimize discomfort if one of your passengers has a sinus block and you just found out once you're airborne? How do you get spatial disorientation? How do you recover? What are the effects of fatigue? What do you need to be aware of if going scuba diving? If your doctor prescribes medication for your cold, are the meds legal for flight? And how do you know? What regulations pertain to alcohol and flying? Do you have to report a DWI to the FAA? What is the I'm Safe checklist? What are your personal minimums for day and night VFR? As PIC, what minimum items are your passengers required to be briefed on? Where do you find frequencies for the airport? What do these NOTAMs say? If your taxi instructions are taxi to runway 10 right via Foxtrot, do you need additional clearance to cross runway 5? What is a sterile cockpit? What is progressive taxi? When do you self-announce at a non-towered airport? You are flying into a Class Delta airport, you establish radio communications, and soon after lose all your avionics, including the radios. What's your plan of action? Do you need a transponder to operate in Class Delta airspace? What light signals clear you to land and to taxi if communications are lost? How do you get flight following? What are the differences between an aircraft incident and an accident? Which do you have to report and how soon? How do you use a VASI? You need to make an unexpected stop at an unfamiliar airport at night. How do you turn on the runway lights? What colors are military beacons? What types of lights identify the beginning of a runway? What is the normal traffic pattern altitude? And where do you find that information for a specific airport? Who has the right-of-way when two aircraft are on final approach to land at the same time at a non-towered airport? Two aircraft are approaching head-on at 3,000 feet. What should both pilots do? What does the dollar sign in the remarks of an automated weather observation indicate? On a short field takeoff, would you use VX or VY for climb out? Why? What is ground effect? Does it affect small airplanes? What are the left turning tendencies? What flight characteristics cause wake turbulence to be the most violent? If you were flying in trail of a heavy jet, how would you alter your flight path to avoid its wake? Do helicopters produce wake turbulence? Can you perform a go-around without an ATC clearance in controlled airspace? What is land and hold short? Where do you find information on these types of operations? And can you decline a land and hold short clearance? When do you need a Mode C transponder? What are these transponder codes? What are some reasons you might divert to a different airport rather than continue to your planned destination? What causes an airplane to stall? How do you know an airplane is stalled? How do you recover? Will the cruise speed be higher with a forward or aft CG? What causes a spin? How do you recover? What are some flight situations where unintentional spins may occur? Where are the VORs based on these indications? After an engine failure, what speed should be maintained? What is a stabilized approach? What is an ELT? When does it need inspection, and when do the batteries need to be replaced? How do you declare an emergency to ATC? Is your night pre-flight preparation any different than day pre-flight? What are some precautions you can take to protect yourself against the dangers of night flight? How can you improve your night vision? What color are taxiway lights? You need to become night current to carry passengers. Sunset is at 7:35 p.m. What time must you begin your landings? When can you log night experience in your logbook? What lights need to be on at night? Starting at what time? What action would you take if you inadvertently entered a cloud at night? I hope this helps with your studying. Thank you for sticking all the way through it if you did. As I like to say at the end, have fun, fly safe, and always keep learning. See you next time.